Right, so I don't know how many of you have seen those clips that have been resurfacing from those. There's been this channel, I can't remember what it's called, and they've had this competitive debate video challenge where they take one person, one individual with controversial views. They sit him in a room against 20 other participants who are in some ways hostile to his or her opinion, and they have these rapid fire, 5 or 10 minute rounds of debate where they confront this motion that's being tabulated. They did one with Jordan Peterson against 20 Christian or Catholics or something like that. I remember seeing clips of those back in Twitter, and I didn't watch them. To be honest, I don't enjoy these kinds of content because debate, for the most part, is a huge waste of time. That's right, I said it. Somebody needs to. Nobody cares about your stupid debate. Debates don't change anything. Debates are for a minority of rich, well-educated people who have an appetite for knowledge, but public policy is not framed by debates. People's ideas don't maybe they do sometimes, but not always. Your political views, for the ordinary person, your views are not decided or won over or lost by debates. Rarely. If anything, what it is that decides what you believe, your political beliefs, they're decided by your personal experience and your perception of reality. I think those two are the biggest things that cause people to adopt beliefs about certain issues one way or another. And it's mainly for that reason why I don't think debates are useful. I mean, they're certainly, they can be entertaining for a lot of people if you take an interest in a subject and you want to be exposed to arguments that are interesting that you perhaps never may have encountered before. Debates certainly can be good for that, and there's a lot of people who get a lot of fun out of debates. But most people just don't want to debate. Most people aren't. I'll be the first to admit I'm not really that bright, and I'm not very good at debating. Honestly, if I were in one of those 1 man versus 20 people debate, I probably wouldn't last very long, because it's one thing to have a debate with your reflection in the bathroom mirror. It's another thing to be sat in a room with an audience who are all listening to you. You're officially representing the position of this ideological tenet that you believe, and if your argument is flawed or gets cut down easily, it's humiliating, and you look bad, and that's I'm not about that. But anyway, I wanted to talk about this specific debate that I saw that people have been talking about recently. It's Mehdi Hasan versus 20 far-right extremists. What was it? No. One left progressive versus 20 far-right conservative Republicans. I forget the exact title, but yeah. So anyway, who is Mehdi Hasan? I'm willing to bet most Americans have never heard of him up until the time of this video. He's described as British American if you look at him on Wikipedia, but obviously he's not American, and he's not even British either. Yes, he was born in, I think it was Swindon, but the guy's parents are Indian. He's a Muslim. Yeah, he's a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. That's how he describes himself. And he is a slimy, nasty, dishonest, disingenuous hack. I remember way back in 2010, or was it 2011, there was an Oxford Union debate, and the motion there was, is Islam a religion of peace? Mehdi Hasan represented the motion yes, and he used exactly the same slimy, dishonest tactics for debate, if it can even be called debate, back then in that video, you can watch it on YouTube, by the way, that he does in this one, and he hasn't changed ever since then. The whole debate is... I could only handle a few minutes of it, and I couldn't stomach the rest of it. A lot of people, broadly speaking, it seems to be agreed upon by most people that Mehdi won the debate against all the against all the far-right fascists that he was up against, except it wasn't really a debate in the true sense of the word, and he didn't do it fair and square. He didn't try to interpret his opponent's arguments fairly. He didn't try to use theory of mind to understand what their thoughts and opinions were. So really, in reality, it was not so much a debate. It was sort of a one-upmanship context between people who hate each other. And this is why I get frustrated and annoyed with these debates, because these debates are not designed for the exchange of the dialectical exchange of thoughts and ideas. It's not. It's about putting two people up against each other who hate each other and watching both of them basically get into fisticuffs. Well, verbal sparring, rather. Honestly, watching that video, it's like watching an old man have a debate with his ex-wife. That's the kind of level of debate that you see in these videos. And they get lots and lots of views. I've taken a look at this channel. This mass debate for... mass debate. That's what I'm going to call it. These mass debates... They've amassed millions of views because they invite controversial figures like Jordan Peterson, people who are regarded as holding controversial views, and they put him in a room with people who vehemently disagree with him or her, and then you have the perfect recipe for conflict and disaster. And that's just not how a real debate ought to be. So a debate, as I understand it, a debate should be a competitive dialectical exchange of thoughts and ideas, typically in a room with an audience. It should be civil, it should be courteous, and there should be a middle ground where both people can agree on broader issues and they can meet each other in the middle. That's the important thing about a debate, is that, you see, I remember studying this back when I was in university. There was a module that we learned called Reason and Argument. You guys can call me a Redditor, atheist, neckbeard, whatever. But no, I think Reason and Argument it was a fascinating module. I really enjoyed it, and I think more people could get a lot out of it if they looked into it. But anyway, there's a concept that's known to people who debate called the principle of charity. I mean, most people don't know what the principle of charity is, but really, it's common sense, right? So the principle of charity is you should try and interpret your opponent's arguments as fairly as possible. You shouldn't try to strawman or misrepresent their position, even if your opponent isn't that bright and he clumsily misrepresents his own position where he sounds utterly ridiculous. You should be fair to him, and you should help him try and, help him construct an argument that appears sound, even if it is flawed or not based on factual evidence. But of course, we saw none of that in this hour-and-a-half shit show, this shit fest, this mass debate between Mehdi Hasan and all these 20 far-right. Really, I'd just call them American patriots, because that's what they are. And I only watched a handful of minutes of this debate. I think I only watched like a couple of excerpts here from there, and it was really more than I could take. Honestly, all the people who sat in the room for that whole hour-and-a-half ordeal, where they had to sit through and listen to this insufferable propaganda, this absolute... I don't have the words to describe them, man. This piece of work, okay. Mehdi Hasan, I can barely stomach listening to him for 30 seconds, so I don't know how those guys managed to get through an hour-and-a-half of this, but well done. Because I can barely listen to Mehdi Hasan talk for half a minute before I get emotionally dysregulated. Because this guy, he does not operate through the rules of debate fairly. He doesn't try to help his opponent he doesn't interpret his opponent's argument fairly and then try and refute it with facts or logic. He doesn't try to meet his opponent in the middle. there's no logic or consistency to his opinions. He's on the record as having saying that he's a Muslim first. He believed that homosexuality should be punished by death. And he claims to be, in the very same video, there's one scene where there's one of the guys who came up to him and said, "I'm a Native American." And he interrupted and said, "You don't look Native American." Except obviously the guy was talking about the fact that he considers himself American and that he was born there. And then Mehdi dishonestly, he cut in and implied that, oh, so you think you're a, an Indian, a Native American Indian. But obviously that's not what he was. And if you were trying to be fair, if you were trying to play the debate fair and square, he wouldn't have done that. But obviously he did, because that's the kind of person he is. So the tactics, the slimy, sleazy tactics that Mehdi Hasan uses in his debates is he gets his opponents riled up by cutting in, by interrupting, by talking down to them and talking over them. I mean, he's exploiting the fact that most of his opponents are a lot younger than him. I mean, some of them were incredibly bright. And one person in particular, who I'll get to in a moment, he takes advantage of the fact that obviously he's a lot older than them. He has a lot more money, and he's a professional journalist, even though he doesn't, obviously, he doesn't peddle the truth. He's a liar, but that's another subject. Anyway, he has access to a lot more resources and information than his opponents do, who seem for the most part, college-educated Americans, some in their early 20s or so, and he talks down to them. There's one guy, I think there was one memorable exchange where he was talking to a guy and the subject briefly moved on to London, and he was talking about, but people don't feel like London's an English city. And Mehdi cut in and said, "I grew up in London. No, don't talk about London. You don't know the first thing about London." Except obviously, there's a lot of British people who agree that London is an absolute cesspit and it's not an English city. I mean, the famous comedian John Cleese said this years back, but obviously none of the debaters in that mass debate, none of them knew that. None of them were in a position to know that, because no one had a bloody clue who Mehdi Hasan was. But anyway, that's just how this guy plays. He gets his opponents riled up. He interrupts. He hectors them. He lectures them. He talks down to them. He misrepresents the arguments and his opponent's position. He only lets them talk when he feels like they're digging their own grave. They're advocating a position that is considered morally indefensible, and he cuts in and tries to distract them and pivots away from the conversation when it's not convenient to him, because the purpose of a debate, for him, it's never to get at the truth. It's never to find some common ground with the opponent. It's not even to argue for or against any motion that's been put to the table. No. The purpose of the debate is for him to expose the far right, or unravel them, or make them look stupid or silly. And as he's a professional journalist and has been for decades now, I imagine he's no stranger to that, because that is what all journalists do in this day and age. So anyway, it's not a fair fight, basically, these debates. You can't compete with someone who doesn't play by the rules like that, someone as slimy and vindictive. I get incandescent when I hear him talk over people like that, when he talks about the whole discussion about immigrants coming into the workforce. I mean, there was one exchange where one of the people he was talking with was saying, all these immigrants are coming here, and he just cut in and said, "That's good." He didn't wait. He didn't wait to hear what his opponent had to say. He doesn't. And then there was another time where he was talking with a guy whose parents were Iranian, and they were talking about, the Iranian was talking about how there were people at the Charlottesville protest who didn't like him and didn't want him there. And he just cut in and said, no, but he was saying, the Iranian guy, the guy of Iranian descent, was saying, but this is a free country and we should be able to respect everything. And he just cut and said, "No, we don't. You shouldn't have to respect the beliefs of far-right fascists." It's just, what do you expect? What do you expect when you put these two people in the same room who will never see eye to eye? See, I believe a debate can only be constructive, it can only be effective if it's among two people who broadly agree on most of the main issues. Like, for instance, I'll talk about myself. I consider myself, right, to be a nationalist and a socialist. So I'm a nationalist. Obviously, I'm anti-immigration, well, most immigration. You know, my views on immigration, maybe I could get that in a different video. But anyway, I would happily sit in a debate with somebody who's a libertarian. But anyway, I could never have a debate with a progressive leftist like Mehdi Hasan, because basically Mehdi Hasan thinks that people like me shouldn't be allowed to exist. People like me should be thrown in prison. Like, a lot of people who move and associate in Mehdi Hasan's... Yeah, Mehdi Hasan, by the way, he writes for this newspaper called The New Statesman, which is basically this liberal wank paper that's only read by these rich elite leftists who believe pro-open borders and Islam is a religion of peace and Donald Trump is a raving fascist Nazi and so on and so forth. Yeah, there's no way I could ever be in a debate, because to be honest, I feel the same way. I don't think leftists should be allowed to be on television. I would throw most of them in prison because I don't believe in free speech. Or let me clarify. I believe in freedom of speech, but only for me, only for people who hold views that I consider sensible and in the public good. And this is why it's complicated and it's difficult to have a debate amongst two different camps who are at each other's throats, who hate each other's guts, who never meet in the middle, never see eye to eye with each other, who perhaps in a different context, different timeline, would probably be at war with each other. And honestly, I feel like a lot of Western countries are already in an undeclared state of war with each other, except that, it's not official yet. But anyway, you're never going to get any kind of courteous, civilized discussion or anything resembling a debate when you have something like that. It was pretty funny. It was hilarious when there was that moment where he was talking to the guy with the pink shirt and the white baseball cap, and Mehdi was talking about himself. I'm an immigrant to this country, and he said, "Get out." That was so funny. Speaking of which, I want to talk about the guy in the pink shirt and the baseball cap, because honestly, I think the guy, he handled himself very, very well in the debate. I think he was very bright. He looked pretty young. I mean, he looked to be only in his early or perhaps mid-20s, but obviously he'd done his research. He was an economics major, but obviously he's not as worldly. He doesn't have the decades worth of experience or the funding or the resources or the connections that slimeball Mehdi Hasan has. And I'm willing to bet that he didn't even know who Mehdi Hasan was before he sat in a room with him. But anyway, we all have to be introduced to this guy one way or another. But anyway, honestly, in a different context where his opponent had been somebody who's perhaps willing to meet in the middle, somebody who might have been pro-immigration, I feel that in those kinds of circumstances, we could have had a more reasonable debate. We could have had discussions like, yes, immigration can be good in some circumstances, but not at the rate that we're currently having. Obviously, though, that's not what happened with this debate, because Mehdi got up to his usual tricks of getting under other people's skin and getting them all riled up, cutting in, and it was, oh my God. I remember that the time when Mehdi Hasan was talking about these economic studies, and the guy in the pink shirt said all those studies are flawed, and Mehdi was like, "How do you know? Are you an economicist?" And he said, "No, but I could be." And it turned out that he was, oh, sorry, grandmother. Sorry about that. My grandma just came in. She was worried about me. Anyway, it was painful watching that happen. He was like, "Oh, so you're not an economicist? I'm not an economicist either." Yeah, but No one cares. You shouldn't need to be an economicist to hold an opinion on a substantial issue, and the guy is an economics major anyway, so maybe you could concede that he knows a little bit more about the subject than you do, or at least let him finish before you interrupt. Well, that's what a normal person would have done. That's what a reasonable, sensible person would have done, but obviously that's not what happened in this shit show, in this mass debate. So it went pretty much as expected. And honestly, the guy with the pink shirt, you know, I think he did really well given the circumstances, but obviously you're never gonna get a word in with a guy who keeps interrupting you, honestly, I'd rather have a debate with my ex-girlfriend than I'd have a debate with this guy, because at least she'd listen. At least she'd wait before talking. At least she'd talk about things that actually mattered and wouldn't interrupt with drivel. But anyway, I've explained, I've made it clear why I don't like these mass debates. I don't find them productive. I don't think they're helpful or useful. And as I've said, they're useless and pointless because none of it changes the on-the-ground reality for ordinary Americans. Most Americans, I don't have the studies to say this, but it's true regardless. Most Americans are anti-immigration. Trump would not have gone into office if he didn't have the groundswell of support and anti-immigration sentiment in the country. And a lot of Americans, their lives have been impacted by immigration. You know, unskilled workers have had their wages cut down and the wages haven't risen because of the impact of mass immigration. These silly mass debates that you see on YouTube, these far-right fascist gets exposed, whatever, and so on and so forth. None of it changes the underground reality that most Americans have to put up with every day. None of this changes the Laken Riley stories, or the time where a homeless woman on the New York subway train cars being set on fire. These stories, these things are happening, and most Americans know that they're happening, mainly due to mass immigration, and this is why people become far-right fascists. Or there was one guy in the debate who said he was a fascist. Yeah, I remember. But you don't need to be a fascist to be anti-immigration. In spite of what this slimeball, Mehdi Hasan, would have you believe. These debates change nothing. It doesn't change the fact that there's Laken Rileys. It doesn't change the fact that Debbie Kawam got set on fire on the New York subway. It doesn't change the fact that there are literally these Indian businessmen who are taking over these Fortune 500 companies, firing everyone who works for them and replacing them all with Indians on these dubious H-1B visas. It doesn't change the fact that Trump, only months earlier, had to call in the National Guard to put down these violent insurrections that are being caused by Mexican nationalists and cartel gang members. This is why Americans are against mass immigration. This is the substance of why people feel the way they do, and it doesn't matter how clumsily or how awkwardly or how inexperienced these people in the right wing will phrase their arguments. It doesn't matter how stupid you make them look. It doesn't matter how easily you get them to unravel and trip over their own logic. None of these things matter because it doesn't change reality. And I remember, I think Sargon actually talked about this on his daily podcast channel, Akkad Daily. And Sargon, I think I mostly agree with a lot of the things that Sargon said. But Sargon said, yeah, I think from this debate, he looked at the comment section and said, I think it's pretty clear Mehdi won the debate. And honestly, I'm afraid I beg to differ. And Sargon, I think you ought to take a closer look at the comments section and who's leaving those comments. Because I took a look, I thought that perhaps Mehdi had won the debate as well, until I found out who it was that was cheering him on in the comments section. And who was it? It was leftists, lunatics, idiots, people with no understanding of the on-the-ground reality, people who believe ridiculous nonsense like America was founded by immigrants and people of color, or the number of people who want him to be sent back. Yeah, I'm not even American. I want him to be sent back. I want him to be sent back to India because I don't consider him British either, let alone American. No one thinks he's American. How dare he come over to America and spout this horse shit about Americans who are funded by immigrants and people like me, and you're a far right fascist if you don't agree with that because I'm a Muslim. Yeah, that's how he says. He says, I'm a Muslim. As a Muslim, I'm well offended by the stuff that you say, and you're a bigot and an extremist, and I'm going to talk down to you because I'm a Muslim and you're a racist extremist. And I get hot under the collar just thinking about it. But anyway, like I said before, these silly mass debates are a waste of time. Debates are only helpful and constructive when they're between two people who broadly agree a lot on the main issues. They're never helpful when you get all these... The purpose of these silly videos is just to generate money, views, outrage, bait, and ad revenue. And I'm willing to bet, by the way, the vast majority of people commenting on that video, leaving those silly, worthless comments, you know, like, Mehdi won the debate, or this dude is a genius. He ran circles around these far-right freak shows. Yeah, I'm willing to bet all those people gravitated to the video because they were readers of mainstream media, and the mainstream media picked up on this debate. Basically, leftist brigading. Brigadiering. What's the word? Oh, yeah, brigading. You guys know what brigading is. It's when people of a certain ideological persuasion get incensed by one isolated story in the news, and they all flock towards it, and they all leave comments, and they give a skewed and misleading perception as to what most people actually think about the video, or where the wind is blowing. But even if, let's just say, even if Mehdi Hasan intellectually outperformed his opponents, even if he made a lot of them look like a bunch of clowns, even if he outclassed them, even if he's really clever, it changes nothing. It doesn't change the fact no one is going to be influenced by this shit show of a debate. No one's going to go into that debate thinking, I'm not really sure, do we want immigrants or not? And then come out of that thinking, yeah, Mehdi's right. We need to bring in more immigrants and more people of color. We need to arrest these far-right racist fascists. That's never going to happen because anti-immigration at this point, in this time period, is common sense. If you're anti-immigration in its current incarnation and you're an American citizen, it is common sense to be anti-immigration. It's anti-common sense to be like Mehdi Hasan. Honestly, I don't even think Mehdi Hasan believes in half the stuff that he spouts. He's an incredible liar. I don't know how he manages it. I don't know how he can spout all those rapid-fire falsehoods one after the other. I don't know how he can seamlessly transition, pivot from one issue to the next without any sense of logical consistency. But basically, one reason is that the media never holds him to account. Nobody ever comes up to him with questions. Nobody confronts him with the real issues. That's how he's been able to get away with it for so long. But the point still remains, it changes nothing. Nobody cares about your stupid mass debates. Mass debates are a waste of time. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. You guys take care. This has been Tracking.